I thank the distinguished permanent representative of the United States for his statement. And now I give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Mr. Vice President, first and foremost, I wish to commend the President of the General Assembly and the Secretariat for convening this important event in observance of International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by the permanent representative of the Gambia on behalf of the African Group. We wish to deliver these remarks in our national capacity. We thank the Honorable Graciela Dixon, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Panama, for her inspiring statement. The theme for this year's commemoration, Triumphs and Struggles for Freedom and Equality, suggests that our observance of the day must go beyond mere remembrance of the victims to foster dialogue on addressing contemporary forms of slavery and to renew our commitment to action. The dehumanizing slave trade, spanning nearly 400 years, resulted in the forced displacement of close to 12.5 million Africans from the continent, across the Atlantic, to the Americas and the Caribbean. While this heinous crime against humanity wreaked devastating consequences for the continent of Africa, we also acknowledge the fact that the victims of slavery and their descendants, through their stories of resilience and survival, inspired movements for change around the world, especially for Africa's decolonization and the Pan-Africanist movement. The influence and immense contribution of slaves and their descendants in the development of the Americas and the Caribbean must be acknowledged and celebrated. The slave trade, in spite of its horrendous nature, resulted in the transformation of the world through the shaping of new cultures. Research has shown that the transfer of technical and scientific knowledge and skills that went with it, together with the African spirituality and cultures, have all impacted positively on modern-day societies across the globe. The irrepressible spirit that led to slave rebellions on the islands of Haiti and Jamaica and many others ultimately inspired the movement to abolish slavery and fueled decolonization in Africa. The influence of renowned Pan-Africanists such as Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois, among others, contributed to Africa's struggle for freedom, equality, and justice. Mr. Vice President, the remnants of the slave trade in Ghana are still visible today in the 40 or so slave forts and castles dotted along Ghana's coastline, 3 of which have been designated UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Ark of Return, located at the Visitors Plaza of the United Nations here in New York, is a permanent memorial to the victims of the slave trade and will, for years to come, remind us of this dark period in history. But more importantly, the Ark also carries a message of hope when juxtaposed with the door of no return, which is located at the Elmina Castle in Ghana, from where thousands of slaves were shipped. Through special events and initiatives such as the Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival, popularly called PANAFest, held annually since the mid-1980s, Ghana has sought ways to bring Africans on the continent and in the diaspora together around the issues raised by slavery, which remain suppressed. Mr. Vice President, faced with the daily reminders of the persistence of contemporary forms of slavery, we must commit to meaningful dialogue on this subject. We are of the view that while greater commitment to existing international conventions will be crucial, our collective efforts to promote the respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, and dignity of all persons, regardless of their race, color, gender, and religion, will be enhanced through continuing dialogue and better appreciation of cultural similarities as well as differences. More than 40 million people around the world in virtually every country remain trapped in modern-day slavery in the form of forced labor, forced prostitution, human trafficking, child labor, and forced marriages, with women accounting for 71%. Failings in the migration system, particularly in fragile states and regions in conflict and crisis, have given rise to horrible stories of slavery-like practices, and this must be urgently addressed. Member states must commit to upholding the human dignity of all peoples and stamping out prejudice, racism, and xenophobia in all its forms and manifestations. This is the only way we can ensure that never again will the world be confronted with the atrocity of the slave trade. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Ghana for her statement.